Welcome to another installment of the Far Post podcast presented by Esports Gaming League. It's episode 351 of our venerable little show. And you may notice we are, unless you're just listening to the audio and you can't tell, but if you're watching the video, you'll notice we are temporarily back to a remote setup. It's just temporary. We will be back in person soon. There's only so much that I can take of being with people in person. So, it just is what it is. We figured we'd go back virtual 1 week. We'll give it a little bit of a break and then we can get back in.
I basically told Jeff that I've had enough of him in person and I just needed a day off of seeing him face to face, have some space. We work like 7 days a week, have a lot of games. So we just needed a little bit of distance. We're going to get back to it. Obviously we'll have a pregame show this weekend and, I'll be forced to be in the same room with you, Jeff.
Exactly. I was trying to save face by saying that it was my decision to be remote today, but it wasn't. It's Elizabeth's decision. She said she didn't want to be in the same room as me today. So it is what it is. We'll make it work. But it's just Elizabeth and I today. We'll be joined a little bit later on the show by Henry Kessler. We'll have a fun little conversation with him. But today it's the me and Elizabeth show. So let's get right into it. And we've got a lot that we've got to pack in because we don't get to do these shows all that often anymore. The Revs play midweek every other week, which means we're kind of packed in with game content. We don't often get a chance to do the podcast because we need a little bit of space in between the games to fit one in. But we get to do one this week. And the last time that we were together on the show, we talked about the Revolution's response to that little 0-2-1 blip that they had. And we talked about the fact that they responded to that blip by going 3-0-0 in a perfect 3-game week. Well, they just wrapped up another 3-game week. And this one, not quite as perfect, only 7 points from the 9 on offer, 2 wins and a draw from this 3-game week, but we'll take it. The Revs are now 12-3-4 for 40 points. It is the first time that the Revs have ever hit the 40-point mark in under 20 games. They have a 10-point lead atop the Eastern Conference standings. They have a 6-point lead in the Supporters Shield race. They're the only team in Major League Soccer averaging more than 2 points per game. And Elizabeth, initially, when I put this together and we were going to have Cahal and Jason on the show, I was going to ask them, since they've been with the club for so long, whether they felt like this was kind of uncharted territory. And I can delve into it a little bit after because I've been with the club for 14 years. I know this is only your 4th season, but I'm assuming for you that the position the Revs are in right now, comfortably atop the league into the second half of the season, is something of uncharted territory.
Yeah, I mean, definitely for me personally, like you said, I've been here for 4 seasons. So when I first came in, we, started out strong with the Brad Friedel era. And by strong, I mean for the first few months, and then quickly, obviously, it didn't pan out quite as we wanted. And luckily, Bruce came in. But I think it's definitely something that's uncharted. And I think to kind of reassure that, I know you were obviously here for the cup run, Jeff, in 2014, but I feel like there's just something different about this locker room and like the players. Andrew Farrell, he's attested to it, just that this group is so special. They'll fight for each other. They'll play for each other. It's something that Matt Turner has touched on too. But it just feels like this group has something different as far as the mentality goes. And it's just unique with the group of guys that they currently have in the room. And I feel like every single player is really bought in to this mentality. And like you said, they responded to that little blip so great to kind of do you one better and kind of put into perspective, the perfect weekend on the 7-point week. That's 16 of 18 points. That's pretty good for the Revs 6-game unbeaten run. So if the Revs can continue the responses that they've had, and even though it's a long season, still 15 games left, if they're able to replicate any of the success that they've had so far, I don't know. I think that they have a really good shot this year.
Yeah, and they've on a 5-0-1 run right now. Before that, they had a 5-game winning streak earlier in the season. And obviously, there have been some very good New England Revolution teams. You think back to 2005, 2006, 2007, 3 straight Eastern Conference championships, 3 straight trips to MLS Cup. There have been some fantastic runs at certain points. You mentioned the 2014 season when the Revs went 9-1-1 through the end of that season after Jermaine Jones joined up in August. And there have been some really, really great seasons, but I don't think even in the 26 years that this club has existed, it's never quite been this type of scenario where the Revs getting deep into the second half of the season are pretty clear Supporters Shield favorites. So it is something of uncharted territory. And I think it's kind of, it's necessary to step back and realize where the Revs are right now and how successful this season has been to this point. Doesn't mean they've accomplished anything yet, and we'll talk about that. But this is a little something different than we've experienced in New England, at least for quite a long time. And to that point, we're now starting to see a little bit of talk, not only about the Supporter Shield, you're starting to see a little bit of talk about the LAFC 2019 season when they set the MLS single season record with 72 points. And now I will reiterate, this is not conversation that's happening in the New England Revolution locker room. I can guarantee you Bruce Arena is not talking about Supporter Shield and single season points records, but that's what we're here to do because it's fun to have these conversations. Right now, the Revs are on pace for just about 71.5 points. And actually, I think Revs Tim Crawford, our analyst, will tell you, I think based on home record and road record and the number of road games that are left and the number of home games that are left, the Revs are actually on pace for, I think, a little bit over 72 points. So I guess my question is it realistic, Elizabeth, you think, to consider that the Revs could make a run at the all-time single season points record this year?
I do think that it's realistic. And this is why, in addition to the mentality and the buy-in that the players have, I think the schedule this year, we're going to see a lot of the same competition. It's all Eastern opponents for the most part. So this team is going to know their opponents really well. I know they're not playing them regionally like last year with COVID, where you're ending up playing the Philadelphia Union 5 times in the regular season. But I feel like they're really familiar with their opponents and the styles. And the road trips are a little bit more, little traffic out here.
You live in the city?
I know. It's crazy. I was muting it for other parts, but I don't know what's going on out there right now. But as I was saying, I think that because the Revs know the Eastern Conference so well, in addition to the road and the home games that you just kind of put into perspective to kind of beat the record that's out there, I think knowing the opponents and not having the additional like cross-country road trips contributing to it can kind of also aid the Revs in having continued success throughout the season. I mean, don't get me wrong, it's going to be difficult, and it's difficult for teams in this league at this point because of how quickly the games are. But with a 10-point lead at this point and only really playing Eastern Conference opponents, I think it's a really good gauge for at the end of the regular season that the Revs can have a very, very comfortable lead in the East. And of course, that's going to translate to the West. I know that there's still going to be some competition for the Supporter Shield. Obviously, the Revs are 6 points above the current place there. But I think that given the fact that they're playing a lot of Eastern Conference teams, the 10-point clearance they have over that, and not having those cross-country road trips that can kind of throw wrenches in your plans as you're heading into that latter part of the season, I think those are all really promising signs for the Revolution to actually be on pace to break that record.
Yeah, and the Revs have not only the best home record in Major League Soccer right now at 7-1-1, they have the best road record in Major League Soccer at 5-2-3. So to this point, it has not mattered where the Revs have played. They have been the best team in the league at home and on the road. And of course, it's a difficult enough task just to win a Supporter Shield in this league. When you start thinking about the most points in any single season, there are so many different variables that can affect that. But the fact that we're sitting here 19 games into the season, even having this conversation, provides some context as to what type of season the Revs are having right now, that you're into the second half of the year and we're talking about the Revs being on pace to have potentially the best regular season in MLS history. That is pretty remarkable, especially when you think about where this team was at the beginning of the 2019 season. The fact that we're 2 years later and we're talking about a team that is pretty significant Shield favorites deep into the season. And one other thing is, I know it would be easy. Again, this is us having this conversation. Mm-hmm. It's not the Revolution players having this conversation. And I don't think Bruce Arena would ever allow any of this type of talk. Like, I don't worry at all about the Revs getting too far ahead of themselves or any of the players or anything. Bruce Arena would not allow the players to ever get ahead of themselves in this type of endeavor.
Yeah, I don't think so either. I don't think Bruce wants anybody kind of getting ahead of themselves in that sense. But what I also think is interesting too is we've talked about how they're doing so well, but I'm not sure how many fans have seen that chart, at least in the Eastern Conference, about where opponents have kind of stacked up throughout the course of the regular season so far through the first 19 games. And what's crazy about that graphic specifically is since early May, or maybe it was like May 16th when they played Columbus. The Revs have been at number 1 in the Eastern Conference. So if you were to, I don't know the exact number of games off the top of my head, but at this point, if we're a little over halfway through the season, that's about a quarter, if not more, of the season that the Revs have been in first place in the East. And for about a week, or I guess it's maybe more like 2 weeks at this point, in the Supporter Shield lead. So it's just been so consistent for this group. But the mentality that they keep having is the one game at a time. They're only looking one game ahead. And I think that's why Arena wouldn't be having these conversations with the players in the locker room, because at this point they don't care about next week. They're not looking at the 18th when they come to play at home. They're only looking at playing north of the border on Saturday at Toronto. But the mentality is working for them. That's why they've had such a sustained success in this league since mid-May, and I think it's going to continue to work for them if they can kind of keep up this pace.
Yeah, it is a cliche, but we've talked about it a ton of times in a bunch of different avenues. This team really does say, look, we're not thinking about a 4-game home stretch, or we're not thinking about our next road trip. We're not thinking about this. We're literally just thinking about the game in front of us. A lot of times Bruce Arena will be in interviews and say, I don't know who our next opponent is after this opponent. Like, we're worried about this game.
Yeah.
We'll take 3 points from that, and then we'll figure out how we go forward from there. And that is a simplistic mindset that seems like it has worked for Bruce Arena for a long, long time. And of course there are a lot of different factors, and it would be naive not to mention Carlos Heel and his health as a factor in that conversation about the Revolution trying to win the Supporter Shield and trying to set potentially a record for points in a season. We must note, of course, Carlos Heel has missed the last 2 games through injury. Bruce Arena providing an update that Carlos has a muscle injury. He is currently working through rehabbing that injury. We know now that he's doing that rehab in Spain with a specialist that helped him return from his Achilles injury last year. He feels very comfortable with that specialist. We should note that specialist got Carlos back about a month ahead of schedule from that Achilles injury last year. Bruce has said that they're going to move him along appropriately. They don't have an exact timeline on when he's going to be back, but they're going to get him back on the field in the near future when he is ready to go. But the fact is, the Revs have already played 2 games without Carlos Heel. They've gone 1-0-1 in those 2 games. So my question would be, Elizabeth, how do you feel like the Revs have been able to cope without the guy who everybody pretty much has said is the best player in the league this season?
I think the team has coped pretty well. I think there's obviously a learning curve when you're taking out your best player, the best player in the league. Unanimously, when we've talked to people about not having Heel in the lineup for the last 2 games, Buxa, he said, he's the best player in the league. Of course you can't replace him. We've had every player we've talked to has mentioned that same sentiment, that there is no 1-to-1 swap for Carlos Heel on the field. But I do think that the Revs have done a really good job of filling in that role and kind of figuring out what's going to work best for them. That, they've tried Tajon Buchanan in different positions to try to get him to be a little bit more of a playmaker. I think too, that what aided this team as well is having Matt Turner, Henry Kessler, and Tajon Buchanan gone for so long that a lot of players had to step up into different roles that, they weren't playing so consistently, or maybe they weren't getting consistent minutes. And I also think Arena was really smart at the beginning of the season when he started doing a little bit more rotation. I know John Bell hasn't played the past few games, but even as an example, having Henry get called up and then John Bell kind of being able to step right into that role, I think he's done a really good job of building this roster to be very versatile. And anytime we talk to, let's say, Tommy McNamara, he always talks about how Bruce has built this roster to be so strong, and like they have curated it to exactly what they need. So I think this team is really capable for filling in for Carlos Heel while he's gone. And I think they're very confident. I think that's probably the biggest thing too, is there's not a 1-to-1 swap, but they all trust each other out there. And they say, if someone makes a mistake, they're going to have their back. So they're really playing for each other out there, and they're playing for Heel. Even when he's not there, they're really trying to make sure that they can fill that void as best as possible, even though it's not possible to fill it with a 1-to-1 swap.
Yeah, obviously you're going to lose something when you take Carlos Heel out of the lineup. There's no way to avoid the fact that when you take the best player in the league off the field, you're going to lose a little something. But it should be noted that the Revs, even without Carlos Heel, have enough attacking talent on this roster to score goals
100%.
and score goals consistently. You're still talking about Adam Buxa and Gustavo Bo and Tajon Buchanan. And I know all 3 of those guys were on the squad last year when Carlos Heel missed a decent chunk of the season through injury, but all 3 of those guys seem like different players this year. Buxa, Bo, and Buchanan have all taken big steps from last year. They have, as you mentioned, tried a couple of different things. Tajon Buchanan kind of played in that. It wasn't the Carlos Heel role, but it was kind of a central attacking role against Nashville. Nashville was able to stifle the Revs. Now, you don't know how much of that comes down to the fact that Nashville is just one of the best defensive teams in the league and how much came down to that system and that setup not necessarily clicking for the Revs. They changed it up a little bit against Philadelphia, went to a little bit more of a flat setup in midfield, kind of got Tajon Buchanan into more of a wide position. He seemed a little bit more comfortable out there. But especially, like you mentioned, with Carlos out, you need guys to step up, and it does feel like it's been a different guy every single week. I mean, in recent weeks, you've had Bo, Buxa, Arnar Traustason have all had braces.
Yep.
DeJuan Jones and Andrew Farrell were both on Team of the Week back-to-back weeks. Brandon Bai scored a big goal against the New York Red Bulls. Matt Polster scored his first goal last week, and it really does feel like that. I know use the cliche next man up. But it does really feel like every single game, somebody else has been the guy to step up and be like, I'll get it done tonight.
Yeah, I love that that's the mentality that everybody's willing to kind of fill in however they can at this point. And, I also have to wonder, I know it wasn't as seamless when Buchanan kind of slotted in that Nashville game, but Nashville's a really strong defensive-minded team. Buchanan was just coming off of his return from the Gold Cup with Canada. I also think there's a little bit of a learning curve when a key player like Carlos Gil is out, that players kind of have to refigure out how they're going to work in a new system. So whether it's a new formation or shifting people around, I do think there's a little bit of a learning curve. And I think that the team is starting to figure that out. And the fact that they can, I think what's most promising for me is the fact that they can grind out results right away on that. So taking that point in that draw against Nashville and then taking the 3 points with the win against Philly is what's most promising, because they still are kind of figuring out how things are going to work without him while he's rehabbing, but they're able to take points while they're doing that.
Yeah. And it's also not as if the Revs are left without a star. Carlos Gil is obviously one of the brightest stars in this league. He's an MVP, a runaway MVP frontrunner at this point. I had 15 assists at the midway point of the season, was on pace at that point, at least, to break the single season assist record. But Gustavo Bo has been absolutely red hot. Major League Soccer's Player of the Month in July. He has 10 goals in the last 12 games. And I know, Elizabeth, because you haven't been here quite as long, there's probably not as much of an understanding of the club's international signings over the course of the club's history. But I think pretty much everyone would agree at this point that Carlos Gil has probably been the most successful international signing in Revs history. And I think Gustavo Bo might be number 2 in terms of international signings, because when you think of kind of the best teams the Revolution have ever had and the best players in club history, a lot of the guys who those teams were built around were through the super draft. I mean, you're talking about guys like Taylor Twellman and Shalry Joseph and Michael Parkhurst and Jay Heaps, who came from Miami, and Matt Reese, who came over from the LA Galaxy, and Clint Dempsey, who came from the super draft. I mean, a lot of the most successful, biggest name players, club legends, all came from within the United States and within the super draft. In terms of international signings, it's a little bit more of a crapshoot. And man, have the Revs knocked it out of the park, I think probably with the 2 best international signings they've ever had in Carlos Gil and Gustavo Bo.
Oh, 100%. And I think anybody that you talk to, as far as players who have been here for the Revolution throughout the tenure of the legends like Taylor Twellman, Shalry Joseph, I think they can also all attest to that. When Steve Ralston was at the game on the 25th, I talked to him about, at that point, Carlos Gil could potentially break his single season assist record, which Gil is very much still on track to do. But, he joked and he said, I think I'm going to start throwing some popcorn down there so that I can trip him up so he can't make the assist record and I can, and he's joking, of course, he's so happy for him. And I asked him about, as a playmaker, kind of watching Gil play, and he was like, he's so fun to watch. It's just kind of contagious. So I think both Gil and Bo are just doing things that are very different. The league has evolved drastically over the 26-year tenure. You have a lot more teams. The style is a lot different. As you said, getting players from within the US through the draft and international has changed a ton. So I think it's fun for legends to watch, and Bo as well. We talked about on our pregame show last weekend just about how, at that point he had 10, now he has 11, which puts him on pace for a pretty good season, I would say, as far as goals go. He could potentially get up there above 20, which the only Revolution player to ever do that in a season was Taylor Twellman with 23 goals. So to be putting Bo's name next to Steve Ralston and Carlos Gil's name next to Steve Ralston, and then also putting Gustavo Bo next to Taylor Twellman and comparing them to these players that are legends for this club just proves that they are game changers. And I think also too, when the MLS Best 11 was done last year for the 25th anniversary, there were conversations. Keel had only been there, for what was it, a year at that point? Like, does he get into this after being MLS Newcomer of the Year? Like, he is a really strong player. And I think with both of them, it was just evident from the second that they got into Foxborough that they were going to be game-changing signings. And that's just something that they have continued to do throughout their tenure here.
And we should note Gustavo Bo right now at the time of recording on August 12th, heading into this weekend's games and the Revs game in Toronto. Gustavo Bo, if the season ended right now, would be your MLS Golden Boot winner. I know that he is tied on goals with Raul Ruidiaz of Seattle on 11 goals apiece, but the tiebreaker is assists, and Gustavo Bo has 3 assists and Ruidiaz has only 1. So if the season ended today, Gustavo Bo is your MLS Golden Boot winner. This is a guy who has consistently throughout his tenure in New England shown that he can score. He can score at any time from anywhere, and it makes him an incredibly dangerous weapon in the attack when he is on. And my word has he been on over the course of the past couple of months. But we spend so much time talking about Heel, Bo. We haven't even talked as much this show about Adam Buksa, who has been really coming into his own in year 2 in Major League Soccer, but also got to give some love to guys like Matt Polster and Tommy McNamara, who combined on the first goal against Philadelphia. And I think this is probably the real genius of Bruce Arena as a sporting director. Is obviously it's a huge signing to go out and get Gustavo Bo and have him hit the way that he has in Major League Soccer. But Bruce Arena knows that these are the types of signings that really build out your team. To go out and get a guy like Matt Polster, who plays such a critical role at the number 6 and who had MLS experience and was hungry for this opportunity. And to bring in a guy like Tommy McNamara, who is so versatile and can go out and play a bunch of different positions and play them well and give you a consistent effort every single time he's on the field and knows the league. I think that's kind of the real genius of Bruce as a sporting director is being able to build the team with those types of signings who kind of give you everything you need around the star pieces.
Yeah, I think 100%. I mean, you can't have your star players without a supporting cast. And I don't mean that to put any players below Bo and Heel, but you need players around them, because if you didn't have talent around those 2 players, they wouldn't be able to score goals. It would be far and few between. But to be able to have a full roster that is really flushed out and can provide value, whether it's playmaking, defensively, or even seeing Polster and McNamara tag team that give and go goal against Philadelphia, you need people that are going to be able to step up all over the field and be able to help play, like the play progress, and also when it's their turn to step up and shine. And I think Arena has done a really good job of making this roster so polished in the sense that these players can step into any of those roles and help each other out.
We can't move on from the Philly game without talking, at least momentarily, about Andrew Farrell.
Yes.
He deserves the recognition. This is a player who, in the Revolution's last game against the Philadelphia Union, made his 255th regular season start in a Revolution jersey. It is a new Revolution club record, surpassing legend Shalry Joseph, now on the coaching staff as an academy coach and helping out with the first team. And when you step back and kind of look at these records that Andrew Farrell is breaking right now, he has already set the club record for starts. He is on the verge of setting the club record for minutes played. He is on the verge of setting the club record for appearances. And he is 29 years old. And when you think about all of the stuff that has to fall into place to be able to break these types of records, and especially to break these types of records at 29 years old, Elizabeth, what are the chances, with the way Major League Soccer is kind of evolving, that Andrew Farrell sets some records in these appearance categories and minutes categories that may not be broken for a long time, if ever?
I think the odds are extremely high. You have to be here for a long time to play 255 starts. That's not something that gets done in a year or a couple years. You take a look at the 34 game season. That's a lot of years for Andrew Farrell, and the fact that he has been happy in New England, and it's been a mutual decision over, I think, what is it for him? 3 or 4 coaches with this team at this point that have wanted to keep him here. So I don't think these records are going to be broken anytime soon by Andrew Farrell. He's been a staple in this lineup. He's been in the starting lineup basically since he was drafted back in 2013. And I think that's an unusual type of player to be able to have that sort of longevity from the time that you were drafted, go through several different head coaches, and be able to still be a staple starter in the lineup, what is it, 8 years later? So I think that Farrell at this point, you said he's 29 years old. He's super young as far as talent goes. And I think he's got a lot more years in him. So if he's here with the revolution for them, I don't know. I think it's going to be pretty hard for somebody to beat anytime soon.
Yeah, I legitimately do believe that Andrew Farrell, the numbers that he ends up with in all of these categories, I'm just not sure. I mean, the way that things are developing with the league right now, things are changing within this league. It's rare for players to spend this amount of time with any single club. The league is becoming a little bit more of a selling league in the sense that when you've got really good young talent, there are leagues around the world that have their eyes on that talent. So the fact is the best players, the best young players in Major League Soccer are probably in the coming years going to find their way out of the league to play in European leagues or South American leagues. And that is the way that the league is evolving. And that's a good thing for the league. But it means that guys aren't spending as much time with a single club, especially if you are a guy who starts every single game. And then you just have to look at the fact that you mentioned, not only is Andrew Farrell a consistent starter over 3 different coaches, he's been healthy essentially his entire career. And that is a testament, and we'll knock on wood, that is a testament to the work that Andrew Farrell puts in on the training ground and in the training facility every single day to keep himself healthy and available every day for 9 seasons at this point. He's still got many, many years in front of him. As we mentioned, he's still in his 20s. I think he's going to hit some numbers in this league. I don't think he's going to approach the MLS records, which are up in the 500s. That would be a long, long time for Andrew Farrell to still be playing. But I think he's probably going to set some records in a Revolution jersey that probably aren't going to be touched, at least for a very long time. And I do think that Revolution fans should be proud that I think Andrew Farrell's name is going to be etched into the top of the record books for a long, long time. And that's a guy that I think Revolution fans can be really proud to see living in their record books.
Yes. Jeff, I have a question for you. So you obviously were here when Farrell got drafted. You're still here now. I don't know how, but you're still here somehow. What's the biggest difference between 2013 Farrell, who first came in, that was in the starting lineup, versus 2021 Farrell, who's now an MLS veteran and a leader in the locker room? And I'm wondering, besides his hair, because I know that's changed a lot too over the years.
The hair has certainly changed. He had the blonde mohawk when he first started.
Yeah.
My first memory, he's evolved a ton as a player, because first when he came in the league, he was playing right back, which is a lot different of a position than center back. And I know he's bounced back and forth between those two positions throughout the course of his career. There's been times when it felt like he was kind of settling into the right back position, and then all of a sudden a new coach would come in and be back at center back. And it felt like he was settling into the center back position, and then they moved him back to right back. So it's been a little bit, it's always kind of been in flux for him, but he's really settled into that center back position in the past couple of years. But when I think of Andrew Farrell's first game, I remember him in Chicago. He was so eager to make the perfect play in every moment. He was, I remember 30 minutes into his professional debut, he was trying to dribble out of the back, and just didn't come off for him. He ended up getting his pocket picked, and all of a sudden someone was in alone after he had his pocket picked, because he was trying to make the perfect play and he was trying to make the flashy play. And I think that was a pretty quick lesson for him at the professional level. And I think he's developed over the course of his career, whereas we don't see that as much anymore. I mean, there was a time when he still loved the bicycle kick clearance. But even that, we don't see the bicycle kick clearances as much anymore. I think he's moved away a little bit from that flash to being a little bit more of, a little bit more of a pragmatic defender. I think he understands defending and understands the nuances of the game. And he's become such a smarter player than he was when he was just, 20 years old, coming into the league and kind of a flashy player and wanted to make the perfect play every play. So he's certainly, I mean, as any player would over the course of 9 years, has evolved, but I think he is, I think he's really just kind of grown into that position, and really, really glad that he has been on the Revolution for the entirety of his career.
Yes.
Alongside Farrell on that back line is Henry Kessler, and behind them is Matt Turner. Both of those players have returned after winning the Concacaf Gold Cup. We're going to be joined shortly by Henry Kessler to talk about that a little bit. But we'll recap Matt Turner's Concacaf Gold Cup performance very briefly. Went 6-0-0 at the competition, had 5 shutouts, conceded a single goal from the penalty spot, won the Golden Glove Award as the tournament's best goalkeeper, was named man of the match in both the semifinal and final, which were both 1-0 victories. So Elizabeth, you asked me this question on the pregame show last week. I'll turn it around now and ask you, when you think about Matt Turner and everything he has already accomplished in his career and the upward trajectory that he is currently on, what is the ceiling for Matt Turner in the game of soccer?
I think that the sky is the limit, honestly, for Turner at this point. And to kind of put into perspective, 2018 was the year that Turner was first named to be the starting keeper for the Revs. And Jeff and I, we were in Philadelphia at the time. That was where the season kicked off. It was my first game with the team, first road trip. And I remember we saw the lineup and we, that was just kind of the first glimpse of it. And we were like, it's not Brad Knight and starting today. We literally found out right before kickoff that Matt Turner was going to be the starting keeper. And I think for me, when I look back on the career of Turner, and obviously you just mentioned all the success he's had in the Gold Cup, he's just always been so humble. That was my first year with the team. And I just remember him being so down to earth, kind, and hungry. And when I say hungry, I mean, he wanted minutes. He worked his, whatever off in training. I don't want to use a bad word.
Say it.
My mom will get mad at me. But it was just really evident the work that he puts in on the field, and to kind of see the growth when he's been given an opportunity. I feel like every time that you've given Matt Turner an opportunity, he's grasped a hold of it. And I think the 2018 season was just a sneak peek of what can happen when you have a player bought into a team with the right coach and how that can kind of evolve. So we've seen the growth that Turner's had. We've seen the success he's had with the national team, but I think he is always hungry and humble as far as the opportunities come. We saw him make his debut with the U.S. men's national team with the 7-0 win over Trinidad and Tobago. And the fact that he was able to save that penalty, actually got to make a really big game-changing save, and how that's kind of translated to his career in the Gold Cup tournament and with the Revolution this season. I mean, it's been incredible to watch. And honestly, I'm sure you feel like this too, Jeff, just to see somebody grow so quickly in this league and get a lot of recognition, which I think is really tough at the goalkeeper position specifically, because there's only really one starting goalkeeper on a team. Like every other position, you're going to have people who are rotating in really throughout the game, throughout the entire season. And it's been a real honor to watch Turner in his rise through the ranks. But at this point, he's grasped a hold of every single opportunity and just completely killed it. So I think the ceiling's really high. I would be surprised. This is just my opinion, but after this season, I'd be surprised if there's not a lot of teams clamoring him from Europe. I'm not saying he would go. I don't know what would happen, but I mean, his success has been global as far as attention's been captured. And I think it's really exciting. He's been named to the All-Star team too. So I think this, his trophy case has got to be getting pretty full at this point. He has the awards from the Revs last season, Player of the Year, Team MVP. He has the Golden Glove to add to that now, and his medal. And who knows, maybe he's bringing home some hardware from the MLS All-Star game later this month. So I think that the sky is the limit. And I know, Jeff, that you talked about it too, that he's been getting some global attention. So it's going to be really exciting to see. But I think for now, he's totally focused on the Revolution. In this game on Saturday, he's really just taking it one game at a time. And I think from the bottom of his heart, he wants a championship for this team, and he hopes that he can lead them there later this season.
Yeah, no question. I think Matt is eternally grateful to the New England Revolution organization, because it is the club that gave him his chance at the professional level. And if the Revs hadn't reached out and offered him that opportunity to come into preseason camp back in 2016, it's possible that he would not have had a professional career. And to think about the fact that Matt Turner may not have gone down the path to be a professional soccer player, just how sad that would have been if he had been robbed of that opportunity and we had been robbed of the chance to see him progress at this level. Matt has been very open about the fact that he does see himself taking his career to Europe at some point. He wants to challenge himself in Europe. He wants to go play amongst the best leagues and the best clubs in the world, and no one would ever begrudge him that opportunity. And I am fairly confident that Matt Turner is going to end up playing for one of the biggest clubs in the world, in one of the biggest clubs in the league at some point down the road. For now, he is with the New England Revolution, and we will cherish every moment that he is with this club, helping lead them towards hopefully a supporter shield and more trophies this year. But I'll say what I said on the pregame show, which was that his goalkeeper coach here, Kevin Hitchcock, who has a ton of experience playing in the Premier League, coaching in the Premier League, has worked with some of the best goalkeepers on the planet. his opinion back in March for an interview with NBC Sports Boston and a feature on Matt Turner was that at that point, Matt Turner was as good as the top goalkeepers in the Premier League. So from that perspective, for me, when you've got a guy who has worked one-on-one with those goalkeepers saying that right now, Matt Turner is as good as those guys. If the question is, what is his ceiling? That is his ceiling. His ceiling is to be amongst the best goalkeepers in one of the best leagues in the world. It sounds absurd to say that about, what's the ceiling for this guy who plays for the Revolution right now? Well, he could be one of the best goalkeepers in the world. That is legitimately the situation with Matt Turner. He can be one of the best goalkeepers in the world. Again, not saying that's where he is right now, but that is the ceiling if that's what we're talking about. We're going to talk a lot more about Matt Turner. We'll get some insight onto his Gold Cup performance and the Revolution's current form shortly, as we will be joined by this show's guest, Henry Kessler. Stay with us. We will be right back. Welcome back to the Far Post podcast presented by Esports Gaming League. We are excited to be joined now by Revolution defender and 2021 Concacaf Gold Cup champion, Henry Kessler. Henry, thank you for joining us. How are you doing today?
I'm doing well. Thank you guys for having me. Excited to be on.
I feel like we need some cheerings. Concacaf Gold Cup champion.
Hey.
We'll add in our own little audio there.
I know for the last couple of home games at Gillette Stadium, that's how you've been introduced to the crowd as 2021 CONCACAF Gold Cup champion Henry Kessler. How's it feel to you hearing that just CONCACAF Gold Cup champion Henry Kessler?
It feels good. My experience was a little different, coming in just for the knockout stage, but it was a good experience. Glad I was able to be with the group. Got my first cap, which I was excited about. So it feels good that, even if I didn't play the biggest role, that, I still got a medal and was still part of the team. So it does feel good hearing that before the matches.
Henry, I know you just mentioned having the medal. How long after the game did you keep that on? Because I feel like if you're given something like that is just so prestigious and you can kind of, drag out the moment in the best way possible. I'm wondering, like, at what point in the night did you take it off and you're like, okay, it's time?
Yeah. So we got the medal on the field, on stage, wore it as we walked around the field, then went back to the locker room, celebrated a bit. It was still on. Got our stuff, went on the bus, medal still around my neck, got back to the hotel room, showered without the medal. Maybe I should have showered with it.
I was interested to see which way that was going to go.
Yeah. But no, so that was when I took it off. And then there was a little celebration with the families. But but it made it to the hotel with me.
Okay. I love that it was more of a forcible removal though. It was like, okay, this is the time because I don't want to, ruin it and get it wet.
Exactly.
Where is the medal now? Do you have it displayed or did you tuck it away somewhere for safekeeping?
I can get it for you guys if you want.
Yeah, go for it.
Bring it on.
Yeah, 1 second.
Let's see the medal.
All right.
Gotta see the hardware.
This is the good stuff. See, this is why, as we're remote, we wouldn't have gotten this opportunity if we weren't remote today.
No, that's true. We wouldn't be able to see his medal.
Here it is.
Ooh, let's get a close up of it. Get it even closer, Henry. Let's see. Look
nice and
at
shiny.
that. Oh man.
Yeah. So it was pretty sweet and nice trophy as well. But yeah, nice, good experience. And then to have these things to take home is nice.
We're going to talk a little bit more in depth about Gold Cup, but I've got to start first before just to not get us off track. You were last night, as we record this on Thursday, you were at Fenway Park last night to cheer on your Revolution teammate and CONCACAF Gold Cup teammate, Matt Turner, as he threw out the first pitch at the Boston Red Sox game, proudly rocking a Boston Red Sox jersey. And I know you had said on social media before the pitch that if he ever put any Red Sox apparel on, he would never be forgiven. I now need to kind of get your response now that you sat in the suite and watched Matt Turner throw out the first pitch rocking Red Sox gear.
He's not forgiven. He is not forgiven. Certainly not. I was happy he threw a strike, threw a great pitch, and it could have gone bad. So he dealt with the pressure. Certainly was out of his element a little bit, throwing instead of catching, or kicking, whatever. But so good pitch. I was happy that he executed well. But yeah, the jersey needs to come off. Unfortunately, he can't keep it, and he'll never be forgiven. I told him that beforehand. We're both Yankees fans, so he actually told me that he asked his family, and they said they would forgive him. I'm a little stricter. I'm not going to forgive him. But it is what it is. Yeah, we move on. We move on.
It's good to know he's got the forgiveness from the family, though. Of the two, that's probably the more important one. Not to downplay your unforgiveness, but
yeah,
it does seem like that is the more important one.
Maybe, yeah. It's close. It's right there. It's a toss-up, really.
So, what was the first thing you said to Turner when you saw him in person? Did you congratulate him, or did you just kind of give him a look of disgust and say, "I can't believe you"?
Yeah, it was. So the first thing I said was nice pitch. Because he threw it pretty hard too. He didn't lob it in there. He threw a nice fastball. So I said nice pitch, and then I said you can take the jersey off now. So that was what followed. But yeah, no, he kept it on. I think he was proud of it, as he should be. Yes. Awesome experience. So good for him.
On Zolak and Burke today, they were talking about how it was one of the best first pitches that they have ever seen.
Yeah, I mean, I wasn't surprised because I know he's played baseball for a while, and he was practicing after practices a bit, but threw, as I said, a hard ball and right down the middle. So
he went up on the rubber too, which you don't have to do. They kind of give you the option. You can go in the front of the mound, but he was like, no, I'm going to go up on the rubber and make this legit. And he did. He fired in a strike.
He fired it in from all 90 feet, I think, or is it 66? I don't know.
60 but anyways, 6 inches.
Okay. But yeah,
90 feet between the bases.
Gotcha. Okay. But yeah, he went all the way up on the mound, made it official.
Yeah. In other words, no part of you when he had that Sox jersey on, it was like, I hope he throws it to the backstop. You still wanted him to fire it in there.
Yeah. So I the one thing I did tell him beforehand about that is like how legendary it would be if he took off the Red Sox jersey and was wearing pinstripes underneath. Like how amazing that would have been. Obviously, I don't think he would have been a fan favorite.
Amazing for who?
yeah. But
for Henry.
Amazing for me personally and the Bronx. But he said no. But he said he did get a couple friends that asked him to do the same thing. So I was glad I wasn't the only one.
That's funny. I feel like with Matt Turner's story of, deciding between playing baseball and soccer, like right up through high school, this was a dream he wanted to execute and execute it perfectly. And the only blip, it sounds like, was that it was the Red Sox instead of his home team, the Yankees. But I feel like that's a trade-off worth taking when you're in the Boston sports scene.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, he's probably, you're right. Maybe you guys have asked him, but he probably has dreamed about throwing a first pitch or like playing on an actual diamond, in a pro stadium. And now he's done both. He's done both soccer and baseball. So, what's next? Basketball? I don't know. Maybe we'll see.
I feel like, Jeff, sorry.
I was just going to say that could be a content series on revolutionsoccer.net. What's next for Matt Turner in the professional sports realm? We got a lot of sports
he do. What can he do?
Well, we'll find out now more in the skills challenge since he's in that, and that just came out.
It's true. All right.
What is there? Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
No. Go for it. What do you got?
I was wondering if there was a specific task for Matt at the skills challenge. I don't know if there is like a goalkeeper section or,
So there's from what we gather, we haven't gotten a ton of information, but it does seem to be like it's the MLS All-Stars versus the Liga MX All-Stars together. So there's no like individual competitions. I think it is a team challenge, but what Matt's in is the cross and volley challenge. So I'd imagine he'll be going up against Liga MX players, and his job will be to prevent the Liga MX players from scoring as many goals as they can on the cross and volley challenge, which would then help the team in that particular event. I believe. I think I've got that right.
Okay. That makes sense. Yeah.
So that one's, I'm sure that's going to be, I don't know how far away they're going to be volleying from. But that's either going to be really tough or he's just going to absolutely destroy it. I think he's going to. All right, let's get to a little bit of Gold Cup talk because we've spent a significant amount of time on the first pitch, but it's just such a great topic. So I want to go back briefly to kind of the beginning of the Gold Cup because you had such a unique experience. You mentioned, you were named to this Gold Cup squad as a medical replacement ahead of the knockout rounds. So you kind of watched the group stage as a fan. Then you get the news that you're going to join the team for the knockout round. So I first just wanted to know, how did you get the news? Kind of what was your reaction when you found out, hey, we need you to come in for the knockout rounds for this tournament?
Yeah. So, watch the group stage, obviously. It was always going to watch the US, but Turner, being there made it even more intriguing. So was supporting as a fan, but I mean, you still see the tactics and try to find out what's going on exactly, how the team is moving, right? I think that's just a pro soccer player. Naturally, you do that when you're watching a game. But, so how I found out was after Walker Zimmerman got injured. It was a couple days after that game against Canada. And Greg Berhalter called me. I was just coming back from Chipotle. And, I got a call from a number that I didn't know. So I was like, another marketing call. Let me just decline this one. So I declined the call, right? Send it straight to voicemail. And then I get a text. Hey, it's Greg. You got a sec. And I was like, oh, that makes sense.
For you, I've got 5.
Yeah. Not just another marketing call. So I call him back, and he gave me a hard time for ignoring his call, but then told me that he was looking to bring me in as an injury replacement. And I was going to be joining the team as soon as possible. So that was a Tuesday night. And he said, yeah, you're getting on a flight tomorrow morning. So Wednesday morning. And then I was with the team by Wednesday night. So it was a quick turnaround. It's kind of crazy because we were just about to leave for a game in Miami. So like my complete focus was on Miami, like packing up, getting ready for that. And then all of a sudden I'm headed to Dallas. So quick turnaround there. And so that's how I found out. And, obviously was glad I could be a part of it.
I mean, that could have been a test too. You could have answered that phone and you could have said, why are you answering a call from a number you don't know? Who does that? That's a weird thing to do. Maybe it might have been a test.
I think I passed. I think
you did as well. You mentioned too, in terms of the tournament itself, it was a unique experience for you because you did get on the field. It was right at the end of the Gold Cup final, extra time of a final against Mexico to make your senior national team debut. I know you said when you spoke with media last week that might be the only person who's ever made your debut in that type of situation. But what did you kind of take from that experience overall of being with that team throughout the knockout rounds of that tournament, going through just the process that you did, and then also getting that little taste right at the end of being involved in it?
Yeah. So what I took away from the knockout stage, I think, of any international tournament is really that the margins are really small. So Jamaica, it was a 85th minute goal, 1-0. Then Qatar missed penalty, and then we end up winning 1-0, I think, in 85th minute again, or late, and then Mexico extra time. So the margins are really small. And that was just, I think that's consistent with most major international tournaments. But that's just, something that I was able to see up close. And, and then as far as my appearance, it was good to get on the field, make my debut, which I was proud about. But, it did leave me wanting more. And, because Matt played such a big role. I'm close with him, and it was great to see. I was so happy for him. But, it left me with more to be desired, wanted to make more of an impact, wanted to play a bigger role. So hopefully that's something that can happen in the future.
You mentioned wanting to play a bigger role. What was kind of the message that Greg Berhalter had for you when you, one, went into the game to make your debut, and then two, as you guys were all leaving? I know Turner talked about how it's one of the special things about a tournament like that is like you might never have that roster of players together again. What was kind of his message as you guys were leaving the camp?
Yeah,
camp,
so
you know what I mean?
Yeah. No, I know what you mean. So the message he gave me going into the game was get myself in a good position on set pieces. Everything safe, everything away. There was only 2 minutes. I only played 2 minutes. There was only 2 minutes left in the game. So everything safe, away, be smart. That was basically the message. And then the message going away after the tournament was, this team just made history. And as you said, the same group of guys will probably never be together again. This exact same group of guys, there will be several mainstays, but the same exact group, same exact roster will probably never be together again. So it was important, and I think it meant a lot to everyone that they were there, and that we came away with a trophy.
And you did get to, as a group, one last time, celebrate together. And I mean, if you're going to win a trophy in any city in the United States, I suppose Las Vegas might be a decent place to win a trophy. And I'm not sure what types of stories you can actually tell us about celebrations in Las Vegas. But what were the celebrations like? Is there anything you can tell us about that night in Vegas, being able to celebrate with that group of guys?
Yeah, so there are. So I'll take you into the locker room after
Okay.
the game. So we are on the podium, on the stage, getting our medal, get the trophy, right? Sebastian and Paul lift the trophy. Then guys are, seeing their families. We head back into the locker room, and they have a bottle of champagne for everyone. People are popping champagne, soaking wet, spraying it all around. And guys start forming a little slip and slide, which proved to be a little dangerous for some, because you could actually get pretty good momentum. But we had a staff member who will not be named, but he actually went on the slip and slide, and I'm just grateful he's not seriously injured. Because it could have been bad. Like once you get going, it's hard to stop. It's hard to, and they saran wrapped the floor to try to keep it dry, but that made it really slick. So as these guys are sliding all around, it could get hectic. So, but I'm glad everyone's okay, and it was a fun time after. But yeah, that's one of the things I'll share.
That would have been a heck of an injury to have to explain, especially if it had been a player and they're like going back to their club and they're like, how'd he get hurt? Well, look, the champagne, yeah, we set up a champagne slip and slide, and then you know how the rest of it goes.
Henry, did you and Turner take a turn going down the slip and slide?
I didn't. I think Turner did, actually. Turner
Okay.
did. He was safe. He went slowly. I did not. But yeah, no, his was perfect. Fluid slide, so
That's
no
awesome.
issues there. Yeah.
I know last year, your rookie year with the Revs was crazy in its own right, because it was, the whole year was kind of overwhelmed by the pandemic. And then you played this really bizarre season in which you also had the tournament in Orlando. So last year was a really weird year. But then you go into this year and you've got the Concacaf Olympic qualifying championship experience in Mexico. You guys are top of the table in the league. You go off to the Gold Cup and you win the Gold Cup. Like, where does this rank in terms of kind of crazy years that you've had? I'm not just talking about the professional level, because I know you've only got two, but just like, is this one of the craziest years that you have ever had? It's only August.
It's got to be right up there with last year in terms of craziest years of my life, really. Yeah, just, a lot of things that, you're not sure what's going to happen next. I feel like I've said that a lot over the last 2 years. Just having to be prepared for anything last year, whether that was a 9 a.m. game this year, whether that's getting a call and joining the national team the next day, so it's different scenarios, that you have to deal with and have to be ready for. So, but yeah, as you said, it's only August and it's been a crazy year. Obviously, hopefully continue to do well in the race for the Supporters Shield. Winning the Gold Cup was great. And so hopefully there's more great things to come.
Henry, how was kind of the transition back to coming to MLS? I know you only played the 2 professional minutes with the team, but, kind of coming off that high, was that like a factor that kind of propelled you coming back to work with the Revolution, or how was that transition for you?
Yeah, it's just, I think the difference in styles, because, not every team plays the same way. So the national team plays slightly differently than Revs do, than we do. So just, getting those things, reminders, how we deal with set pieces differently, everything, making sure, I was remembering how to do things here, how we do things here, because they do change from club to club or club to country. So, just making sure I'm sharp with all those little details. And, I was fresh, so played against Nashville, and, obviously we weren't happy with the draw, but was able to get a clean sheet. So that was kind of the transition, and then get a win against Philly was good. And then this week, initially recover and then prepare for Toronto. So that the transition was fairly smooth. I imagine it was a little harder for Matt, being playing so many games. But I was pretty fresh, so I think I was prepared.
You mentioned being fresh. It's interesting because you guys are 19 games into this season. And last year at this point, that was almost your entire regular season. You played 23 games in the regular season last year. And I know they were all compacted, so it was a little different. But then you guys went into the playoffs after 23 games. This year, you've played 19. You've still got 15 regular season games to go before the playoffs. So for you, having your only professional season be kind of that, abbreviated, compacted season, how are you kind of mentally and physically preparing for the rest of this season, knowing you're already right now about it at the longest season you've had?
Yeah, there will be some similarities to last year in that I think we have 3 games a week several times coming up. So there still is this compactness in order to fit in World Cup qualifiers and FIFA windows, try to honor those. So I think there, some similarities to last year in that sense. Right. But it's a longer season. Certainly not done yet. And we have a lot of work to do, for the rest of the regular season leading into the playoffs. So, it's not a sprint, it's a marathon, and we'll have to keep pushing and, keep grinding away results, hopefully. And there's a lot of time left, as you said.
You mentioned that mindset, and obviously that's what we hear a lot, because right now, kind of the outside noise is the Revs have a 10-point lead in the Eastern Conference. They've got a 6-point lead in the Supporters Shield, and everyone's talking about how great this season has been through 19 games. But obviously from within the team, you hear all about, well, yeah, there's still 15 games left in the regular season. There are still trophies to be won. There's still so much work to do, and all of the toughest challenges are in front of us. How do you kind of maintain that mindset? How do you stay level, and how much of that comes from the messaging Bruce kind of gives to the team every single day on the training ground?
Yeah, I was going to mention Bruce, because we're really only halfway there is what it comes down to. And, he knows that. He's got so much experience. He's won Supporters Shields in the past, also MLS Cup, obviously. But, so he's telling us, we got to keep going. We got to keep going. And, there's a lot of time left. And, we're still trying to figure teams out. He said you have a better idea about who is who after 25 or so games. So, 6 more games, I think we'll have a better picture of what the table and what teams look like. So we got to keep going, and it's certainly not over, and it's not close to over. So that's been his message.
Henry, I have a little bit more of a random question kind of coming from that, but I know that Bruce is the only professional coach that you've ever played under. But with that, I'm wondering, what's the best piece of advice, whether it's on the field, something a little bit more quirky, because I know Arena can kind of go off task sometimes and give you some fun advice, but what's kind of the best advice that you've gotten from him in your tenure at the Revs?
I'm trying to think, because most of the advice I get from him is regarding to how I play.
Yep.
So, things that he says are, mark a man, don't mark space. Something like that. He'll say space never scored a goal. So these are lessons that he's tried to ingrain in our brains, us defenders, and, protect the space behind you. I'm trying to think, play quick. These are all little snippets that, are important, that help us play well and are important to how we play. So, just keeping those in mind. And I'm sure there are others, and I'm sure there are off the field ones that I can't think of right now, but those are just some to mention.
Very nice. Thanks for sharing.
Yeah, no problem.
It's funny because I know, I can't remember in what show it was. Dan Gargan told a story recently about literally a really similar story about playing for Bruce. And he said at one point he was kind of marking space at the back post. And then after the game, Bruce asked him, Gargan, who were you marking on that play? And he said, well, there was a bunch of free space at the back post. They're about to whip a ball in. Figured I'd kind of, make sure no one made that back post run. And they were playing against the Red Bulls, and BWP was on the team. And I think he said, Arena asked him, who's the leading goal scorer in Major League Soccer? And he said, I think it's Bradley Wright Phillips. He said, you know who it isn't? Space.
Yeah.
that lines up.
That's a great story. And you're right. It does line up with what he's told me and the rest of us defenders. So that makes sense.
That's really funny. I feel like during quarantine, I did an interview with him, and he had it wasn't as specific to defenders necessarily, but he had all of these post-it notes that he took out from behind his like little cubicle, or not cubicle, sorry, his office, and pulls them out and just starts reading like all these quotes. And he was like, I'm going to read these to the team when they get back. And they were like little inspirational tidbits. So I love that he has little phrases that he can kind of just dole out to you guys and you all have ingrained in your minds.
Yeah, it's nice, just little reminders of things that are, small but important in the game.
Mm-hmm.
So it's good to know.
Elizabeth, I know you corrected it, but I do like that image of Bruce working out of the cubicle of the Revs offices.
If he wants, he can trade with us, right? We can go take his office if he wants.
I'll take the office. Well, Henry, we've taken up enough of your time. We really appreciate you joining us. Best of luck Saturday in Toronto. We will talk to you very soon, I'm sure. But best of luck this weekend.
Thank you so much. Thank you guys for having me. Always a pleasure.
Yes, and thank you for showing us your medal too. That was great.
Oh yeah, wait. One last snippet.
There we go.
Let's end
on the high note.
There we go.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thanks again, Henry. We will be back momentarily. We'll have some thoughts on that Toronto match. Stay with us. We are back once again on the Far Post podcast presented by Esports Gaming League. And as we are back, the Revs will be back on the road this weekend, and they're back in Canada for the first time since the 2020 season opener when they were in Montreal. They're back in Toronto for the first time since March 2019. Toronto, Montreal, Vancouver, Major League Soccer's 3 Canadian sides, all finally back playing their games at home north of the border. And that's exciting for the league. It's exciting for us because, again, it's just kind of another step in the process of this slow return to normalcy. But I think it's worth noting. I'm not sure that any of us who weren't with those Canadian teams are ever going to quite grasp the sacrifice that it took over the course of the past year. Because obviously we have our perspective of the sacrifices that we made, and they were significant for a group of us who went down to Orlando and lived in the bubble for a month at the MLS's back tournament. That was a significant sacrifice for us to then come back and go through the season last year and be involved in a COVID protocol that required us to be at the training facility 3, 4, 5 times a week, at the very least every other day for 6 months to go in and get COVID tested. We were essentially tethered to the training center for 6 months. There were significant sacrifices on that front. But then you think about these Canadian teams who played their home games away from home in the United States for basically the past year. You think about the Vancouver Whitecaps, who just got back to Vancouver after living in Salt Lake City, Utah for like 5 months. And that's players, staff, everybody. I mean, it's an absolutely unbelievable sacrifice that these clubs went through to continue playing matches over the course of the past year or so.
Yeah, I mean, Bruce Arena talked about this the first time that we played Toronto earlier this season, and just kind of talked about, the head coaches. I know they've had a head coach change that was happened right before the season, but right before we played them earlier in the season. But he talked about how it's really tough for those coaches to take their players out of their markets, away from their families, and not to play in front of their home supporters. So I think the Canada teams have had it really, really tough just from that perspective of, it was, like you said, it was a huge sacrifice. And it's harder to get your players to kind of rally when they're not in their home market and they're not with their home fans, and being able to recharge and be able to rest with their families. So I think it's a huge sacrifice. I think they've had the biggest obstacles over the last year and a half that they've had to overcome because they've been playing in different cities. But I do have to imagine that they're totally relieved and happy to be playing back at home now that the restrictions have changed a little bit going north of the border. So I think it's going to be a different battle for the Revs going to play at Toronto. It's a place they haven't been in a while. And you throw in this wrench, the Revs are actually, I think, winless in their last 6 against this Toronto side. So they've struggled as far as playing at Toronto, playing at home against them in the MLS's back tournament. So it's going to be a tough test for this team. And I'm also curious to see how they respond, because as we mentioned earlier today, they haven't had the challenge of traveling cross country this season midweek and having all of those obstacles. But going to Canada, it is an extra obstacle having to travel outside of the country. So I'm curious to see how this Revolution team can kind of respond. But I do commend all of the Canadian teams for doing what they needed to do to continue the MLS season, because that was a huge sacrifice. And it's something that I think everybody throughout the league notices that these teams did.
Yeah, I mean, you think about the fact that for all intents and purposes, Thierry Henry is no longer the CF Montreal head coach because of that situation. Because after spending the entirety of last season, when they were last season, they were the Montreal Impact and they were playing games at Red Bull Arena. And then this year they went down and they were playing their games in Florida. And Thierry Henry essentially said, look, this is such a massive sacrifice to be away from my children for this length of time, to not be able to be with them in Canada or go back to Europe. I think his family was still in Europe, and saying, I'm unable to go visit my family in Europe because of the restrictions. It's just too much of a strain, and completely understandable. Just an unbelievable sacrifice from these teams over the course of the past year. And it brings up, I think, an interesting question, a little bit of a lighter question under the circumstances. If you were told, Elizabeth, the Revs are going to play for the next 6 months in a random US city somewhere, where is it that you would have wanted to spend your 6 months holed up with the Revolution? What city would you have picked?
Can I pick a city beyond the ones that were designated for the Canadian?
Yeah. And I think it should be a US city, because obviously, like my pick might have been, if it was any MLS city to spend a significant amount of time in, I probably would have picked Vancouver. But the point is, Vancouver had to leave Vancouver because of the situation. So I guess we'll keep it to the US MLS cities.
I think if I had to pick a US city, I mean, I love the West Coast. I would love to spend some more time in Los Angeles. I know they have their own COVID issues, but if you were to take that away, that would probably be my pick, is playing out there. And LAFC, they have a beautiful stadium. I think that would be really cool to call home base for a little while. And if I were to pick somewhere that was a little, well, I don't know if it's more remote, but I've also never really spent any time in Texas before. I think it'd be cool to also get to kind of spend some time down there. Maybe I know this year's a little bit different because it's their opening season, but maybe even Austin, maybe see Matthew McConaughey down there. I don't know. It could be kind of cool. So those would probably be my top two picks, or Colorado. It'd be really cool to do some hiking out there and kind of social distance in that way. So I know that was probably more than you were asking for, Jeff, but those are the ones that kind of come to the top of my head. What would be your pick?
Yeah, I know it's pretty clearly the obvious pick, I think, but Los Angeles, I think, is the pick for me. One, because the weather, I think, would be the best. Anywhere else you pick, you're going to have some sort of extreme where it's probably going to be a little too hot at some point, or it might be a little too cold at some point. You go out to LA and you're probably going to get the best of both worlds in terms of the weather. You've got the beach there. I grew up on the East Coast with the beach. So to be able to be out on the West Coast with the beach, I feel at home on the ocean. I have family out on the West Coast. My brother and my sister-in-law and my niece all live out on the West Coast. So I think if I had to go somewhere, I'm picking LA, but Denver's not a bad shout as well in terms of kind of the outdoorsy life in Denver. That would probably be a somewhat distant second, but I think that would probably be my second pick.
I like it. We're aligned.
There you go. All right. Well, talking specifically about this game, you mentioned it a little bit. Toronto are now back home at BMO Field. This will be their 5th game back at BMO Field. They're still settling in a little bit. They've actually played to 4 draws in their first 4 games back at BMO Field. This is a Toronto FC team you mentioned the Revs have struggled a little bit with recently, including 5 weeks ago when Toronto FC, getting that new coach bump from Javier Perez, came into Gillette Stadium and were the only team besides the Revolution to win in Foxborough this year. Now, the Revs were down 3-0 inside 24 minutes in that game. From then on, they were pretty dominant. They ended up coming back and making that a 3-2 game, and they had chances to tie it up at the end. So my question is, do you just chalk that up to a slow start, or should the Revs be pretty wary of this Toronto FC team that just beat them 5 weeks ago?
I honestly think it's a little bit of a hybrid in the sense of I can promise you that the Revs are harping on that slow start from that game 5 weeks ago, and that they're saying they need to score that first goal. I can promise you without any insight that is something that is being talked about in the locker room heading into this game. But I also do think that the Revs should be wary of this Toronto team. We talked with, I think it was Tommy McNamara, who was telling us earlier this week that this team is desperate for points. They're playing at home. They're really strong. Bruce Arena also talked about that. And, this team, if they want to make any sort of run and push for the playoffs at this point, at being bottom of the East and struggling this year, and under their new head coach, they need to start doing that now. So that would start with 3 points for them with a win at BMO Field at home. And that's what the Revolution don't want. So I think the Revs are really going to be harping on that first goal, coming out strong, and also closing the game strongly as well, because those are the things that they need to do in order to lock up 3 points this weekend. But I think the first goal is probably the most important thing.
Yeah, I know it's really easy to look at this Toronto FC team and look at the standings and see them at the bottom of the Eastern Conference and assume that this is a certain type of game, even taking out the fact that Toronto came into Gillette Stadium and beat the Revs 5 weeks ago. But this is a Toronto FC team that, in terms of the quality on this roster, this team finished second in the Supporter Shield race to the Philadelphia Union last season. They were alive on the last day of the season to potentially win the Supporter Shield. A lot of those pieces are still on this roster. They've been reinvigorated under Javier Perez. They've only lost 1 in 7 since Javier Perez took over. You got a guy like Alejandro Pazuello, who was the league MVP last season, who appears to be rounding back into form. He's getting healthy. He had a goal and an assist in their last game, his best performance of the season. So this is a team that is going to present a much bigger test than a bottom of the Eastern Conference team on Saturday night.
I think also too, when you look at the Revolution and how they've played this year, they've lost to 3 teams who have been at the bottom of their respective conferences. So I'm not saying that they've slept necessarily on teams that haven't been doing well, but I think at this point they know that every single team you have to keep a close eye on. So that's just also a note that's worth saying, is that the Revs, the team that they've lost to, haven't been top contenders in the Eastern Conference or the Western Conference. They've lost to teams that have been at the bottom. So, and the Revs are still at the top, which is a great thing. So I think if they can stay locked in for this one, it's going to be really big for them.
Right. And just to wrap things up, this begins another 3-game week for the Revs. This one even a little bit more compact than we've seen in the past. Typically, the Revs have gone Saturday, Wednesday, Sunday, playing 3 games in 9 days. Now they'll go Saturday, Wednesday, Saturday. So 3 games in 8 days. So even less time to get themselves ready for that 3rd game. And now when you look at the rotation this year, the Reds have rotated quite a bit. Mentioned Bruce Arena has done a great job keeping this team fresh. The 2 guys who really hadn't been rotated out, who had been playing every minute regardless, were Carlos Gil and Andrew Farrell. Obviously at this point, Carlos Gil getting essentially an enforced rest because of the injury that he's recovering from. But Andrew Farrell has still played every minute this season. You don't really have another break until October. The Reds do have a break from, I think, September 29th to October 16th. They're going to go 2.5 weeks without a game. So there's a big opportunity to rest then. But there's 10 games between now and that break in October. My question is, do you push Andrew Farrell through to that break in October and let him get a rest then? Or do you have to find a place somewhere over the course of these next 10 games to maybe give Andrew Farrell a little bit of a breather?
You know, I think Andrew Farrell deserves a breather, but he is such a veteran presence on that back line that I'm not confident he's going to get a breather until then. I just think that his leadership is key for them back there, and he has been such a consistent presence. So I don't know, Jeff. I think he might get pushed all the way through October at this point. You also have a couple weeks. I know this week is a 3-game week, like you said, 3 games in 8 days, but there's a week coming up. I think it's August 21st, between the 21st and the 28th. You got 6 days of rest. So I don't know. I think that they might try to push him through October unless something comes up where maybe they need to force it a little bit more, but he's such a veteran presence that I think they might want him on the back line, and more when John Bell is fully back and healthy, try to rotate Bell and Kessler in. But I could see Farrell making it all the way to that point.
Yeah, you do have John Bell getting healthy. He's missed the last few games with an injury, but he does look like he's getting pretty close to rejoining training and getting back out on the field. I think there's just so many games coming up in such a short period of time, and it's just so many minutes. I don't know. I think you might find one game where it's a Bell Kessler combination to give Farrell just a little bit of a rest to get him through to that break in October. I know you want him on the field for that leadership as much as humanly possible, and the Reds have done that through the first 19 games of the season. But I don't know. All the credit to Farrell. If he can power on through, which you've seen him do throughout the course of his career. He's been available for every single game basically that he's been on the roster. But that would be a heavy toll on the legs. And I don't know. I think you try to find a game if you can over the course of these next 10 games to give him a little bit of a rest, then get him that really big rest in the beginning of October, 5 games left in the regular season and then into the playoffs. But we'll see what Bruce Arena decides to do. Obviously, he knows more about this than both of us, 10 of us combined. So we will trust the decision that Bruce Arena makes in that regard. But I think that'll do it for this installment of the Far Post podcast. Thanks. I mean, I think considering it was our first Jeff and Elizabeth show,
Yeah.
I thought we carried the torch pretty well.
I think we did too. If you guys think we did all right, let us know. Shoot us a tweet. Give us some feedback. maybe we'll kick the other guys out. Maybe
if
Dana
it
and
went
Hall
well.
are going to get the boot.
Yeah, for sure. All right. Well, thank you as well to Henry Kessler, of course, for joining us. And thanks, of course, to you all for listening and watching. We'll be back after the Revs' next run of 3 games in a week. We'll talk about it here on the Far Post podcast, presented by Esports Gaming.